Hi, everyone, and welcome to the festive calendar. My name is Thiago, and I'm going to just talk a little bit about how you can secure Azure OpenAI and also Azure AI Services and bring some best practices here from the cloud. If you want to know more about me and follow me a little bit more on social networks, you can always go on follow.thiagocosta.com. You can find all the links for it. But knowing a little bit about myself, I mainly work as an AI and cloud architect. I'm also a trainer, author, and public speaker. So you can easily find me, just creating content, going on conferences that are sometimes Microsoft conferences, community conferences, and share the knowledge about AI and Microsoft. I work as an independent contractor, basically work for myself. I've been working with Azure since 2010, and I'm also an Azure MVP for 10 years now, certified trainer, MCT community lead. So I have also a bunch of other, certifications out there. I'm basically, based in Lisbon, Portugal, and as you can see by the number of visit countries, I love to travel. It's kind of one of my big passions is to basically to travel around the world. So what are we going to talk about today? So today we have a packed agenda here, and we're going to start talking about this initial application architecture. That sometimes, to be honest with you, calling this an architecture, it is a little bit far-fetched. But okay, let's call it that way. This is usually what I find at customer sites. So usually when I go to a new customer site, this is the kind of design, that they currently have and they currently are using. And then let's talk about how we can improve this, because that's not good at all. So we're going to talk a little bit about, key-based applications. We're also going to talk about keyless authentication. And then, Microsoft Key Vault. We're going to talk a little bit about how you can improve PaaS security, network security, and some key takeaways that you can take from this session today. So our initial application architecture usually is something around this, okay? Where, as you can see, we have a web application configuration file. There is, some kind of keybase out here. So in our web application, in a config file, like an environmental file, a web config, something like that, an app settings, if you're from the .NET world. And then through those keys, you can reach Azure AI Services, you can reach OpenAI. So that's usually, something that I find a lot of my customers, this model. And, if we do something like this, and this is Python accessing, an Azure OpenAI instance, what we have here is, for sure thing, we are using the OpenAI SDK that actually defaults to key-based because that's actually what it is supported with OpenAI.com. So if you go directly to OpenAI, this is what you get. But in Azure OpenAI, that's a big difference because we can actually do things slightly different. But, we're going to talk about that just in a moment. And as you can see here, we are going to have an endpoint and we have a key. And this is all you need, okay, to basically authenticate yourself in, an instance. And then for sure thing, then you need to do calls, etc., to do whatever you need to do. What are some of the risks that we have of API keys? Well, first of all, they can be easily leaked, right? So easily, hey, this is my key. And because keys are actually super complex, sometimes what people do is they just save them, in a notepad somewhere, in a text file somewhere, where basically they shouldn't, be keeping this kind of stuff. Then we talk about they can be passed around in a company, sometimes, not an intentional way. Sometimes when people do this, they don't even have, the notion that they're doing something really, really, really bad security-wise. And, sometimes they are painful to rotate, because when we have something like key-based authentication, you should rotate your keys. And, when we talk about rotating the keys, is, grabbing a new key and, replacing that key in all the applications and disable the old key. And then, sometimes that's something that, it can actually be hard to get. And then talking about, imagine that you want to get a key, okay, to get to OpenAI. And imagine that you want to get this. So I always like to do this as kind of, basically, kind of a demonstration on how bad sometimes this is. So if you go, for example, to github.com, okay, and in github.com, well, where is the github.com? Come on, there you go. And for example, you just search for something like this. Okay, so OpenAI underscore key, and then E equals to double quote, and then SK. So if you just search for something like this, you're going to get tons of results. So not on repos, but what we want is code. So we're going to select code there, and you're going to see that first result doesn't get me anything. It's just some demo stuff. But if you scroll down, okay, you'll find that in no time, we're going to find something, okay? And so here you go. See here? So da-da-da-da, and then some key in here. Look, we don't know if it works or not. I'm not going to test it, but this is just to prove. We have 131,000 results. For sure, most of them don't even have a key. The ones that have a key, I want to believe that most of them will not work because the keys are not, valid anymore. But I'm absolutely sure that some will work. And I'm sure you do too, correct? And the thing is, this is just it's a game of numbers, right? With all those that are here, this is because people expose them into public repositories. Of course, that's a big, big, big mistake. But unfortunately, that's what you get. Some engineers that are not so experienced, this is the kind of mistakes that people do. So, moving on. Environmental variables. This is something that, instead of having this in a file, maybe I might want to work with environmental variables. They are encrypted at rest. If we're talking about, for example, in Azure App Service, they can be transmitted over encrypted channels. So everything is HTTPS based. Nothing goes that is not encrypted. Nothing is transported in an unencrypted way. And they are going to be exposed as environmental variables to your application at runtime. Not before, okay, not after, at runtime. And that's actually quite cool because I can have developers, working on an app, developing, writing amazing code, and I can have other people worrying about putting the right values in the right environmental variables. So basically what I want to do is this shift, okay, is moving things from a configuration file, okay, into, okay, settings that I'm going to have, okay, in an app setting. So now, let's just work out here and let's just see here a demo on using environmental variables as app settings in, an Azure App Service. Okay, so we have here already created, just an app service. If we go to this app service in here, okay, and under settings, you can find something called environmental variables, okay? And if we go to this, we have app settings, we have connection strings. In this case, let's just work out with this with like, an app setting here. And we can easily come in here and, just say, for example, AZ, okay, OpenAI, underscore key. Okay, and in the value, hey, yeah, okay, let's just drop here, our key, and let's just imagine, this was our key. And now I can just apply this. I can then save this. Now I do not want to save this in the browser, but I want to save this in here. And when you save this, so now all you need to do is make a reference to this, okay, into as an environmental variable. Okay, so whatever environmental variable you use, if it's Python or if you're using this through .NET, Java, that's all you need to do to grab the value that you have there. Okay, so that's actually quite cool what you can do with this. But let's be honest, there's way more that I can do about it, and better. So this, we talk a little bit about, the external secret storage concept. I want to have something that is, not dependent on that specific web application. Why is that? Because let's just use this here, okay? I have a web app here, right? So this is my web app. And I have put it, that key here, stored here in my Azure web app. Now let's imagine that I don't have a single web app. I have tons of different web apps. And, I have here an Azure, OpenAI instance. And, I need to go each one of them, add the value of the key so that each one of those apps is able to communicate successfully with our instance. If we do a rotation of that key, I need to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different Azure web apps and change this. Now, instead of 5, imagine, like I have, cases of customers where we have hundreds of them. It's unbearable. We can't do that. So we need this concept of this external secret storage where we just have a reference on those web applications, those Azure web apps, to this secret storage, but actually the value of the key is going to be stored in here, in the secret storage. And of course, we need to think about encryption at rest. It needs to be encrypted. Transmission needs to be encrypted too, when those Azure web apps are communicating with this secret storage. And of course, I want to have increased security control. I might want to have auditing. I might want to have logs, a bunch of all different things. The answer in Azure comes in the form and shape of Azure Key Vault. And Azure Key Vault is basically, a place where I can just safeguard, encryption keys. I can safeguard secrets and certificates, okay? It gives you a lot of control. It gives that your applications will not have that direct access to the keys. This integrates together with Microsoft Intra for all the authentication and authorization bits. So you're like all good, okay, when it comes to this, okay? And then it comes in different flavors, okay, or SKUs. Let's use the more normal term for this. And it comes with standard premium. So the big difference between standard and premium is the encryption. Premium uses hardware security modules, and the Key Vault managed HSM means that you're going to have a fully dedicated infrastructure for you. In the premium and the standard, that's not the case, okay? It's going to be shared, but this will gives you that dedicated. If you work with customers in financial services, healthcare, government, this is the kind of things that they care about, like a lot. And so when we when we talk about, hey, Azure Key Vault, oh, okay, but which SKU? And already having lots of people say, oh, premium, it's awesome. Yeah, but it's not that great for them, okay? So, but there you go. Then, when you create a key vault, you need to select a permission model. And look, the short explanation for this slide is go RBAC. RBAC is the best practice. There's not even a question on that. If I'm building something new, it's a no-brainer. It's not something that I even, will have lots of discussions about. We go RBAC, okay? There's still some limitations in RBAC if you want to go deep on this, which I'm not going today. But most of the times, you're not going to hit those limitations. So you should be fine with RBAC. Vault access policy, it's in here because, that's what we got at the beginning of all this. But now, RBAC is role-based access control, and it has the integration with, Entra ID, etc., for the authorization through, a role assignment, like a standard role assignment. Vault access policy, no. You actually need to go inside Key Vault and do all this inside Key Vault, okay? So now let's talk a little bit about, how we can use this, because now what I can do is not having, those web applications storing, for example, that key to access, OpenAI, but actually store it in Azure Key Vault as a secret. So with this, let's just do here, okay, a very quick demo first on how we can just create, okay, a key vault. Okay, so let's do that one first, and then we were going to work out other bits of this. So we need to create a resource, okay, and this is the standard stuff if you're used to Azure. You search for key vault, and as you can see, this is the one that we're going to use. But we also have, others, like for example, the Azure Key Vault managed HSM. Okay, that's the one that I talked about, that, we're going to have a fully dedicated infrastructure. Well, today, I'm just going for the regular Key Vault. That should be more than enough. And I'm just going to drop stuff in the AZ Festive Calendar resource group for this. And let me type here, okay, calendar, and that should be enough. Now you just need to select here region. I'll go with West Europe, which is the same where I have my app service. You don't need to, because you can actually create this in another region, but as a best practice, you should try to keep it as closer as possible, for latency purposes. Then the pricing tier, standard, premium. See, this is where we can select premium. Look, I'm good with standard for this demo. If I was doing something for production scenarios, I will go with premium most of the times. Then we have the access configuration, and this is where, see, I can do RBAC, which by the one is the recommended, and it's actually the one that comes enabled by default. But you still have option to go with Vault Access Policy, and just be careful with this, because you're going to have like tons and tons of Azure Key Vaults out there in the wild that will be configured that way, because that's the only thing that we had when we first create them. Then, you can also do some networking stuff like in most Azure resources. And then, sure thing, we can just basically create here our resources, okay? So now this is going to create our key vault, and, creating a key vault is actually quite quick. Doesn't take, that much time. It's usually just a few seconds, and you should be good to go. Okay, so let's just, there you go. Okay, I didn't even pause the video, see? That was that quick. And for sure thing, now I can go here under keys, secrets, certificates, and, actually start working on this. But before we do that, let's question about something. What about authentication? So like I said, we're using Microsoft Intra. More specifically, Intra ID, because Intra is this unified and network access for everything that is identity and network access. Okay, it's the new brand. Well, not so new, okay, but it's this brand that Microsoft has that has tons of different things, and this is just a subset of that. And I just want to focus on Intra ID, formerly known as Azure Active Directory. And Intra ID gives me features like single sign-on. It gives me access, like things like conditional access, which I'm personally a big fan, multi-factor authentication, and very important, protection and security measures like identity protection, and identity governance. That helps you protecting your identities. It also allows me, okay, to use something called managed identities. And I don't know if you already know managed identities, but I'm personally, a big fan. And managed identities allows you to add an identity into, a device or into an application, for example. The way that this will work is something like this. So we have here, and let me just put my laser on here, an app service. So like we were talking about, we have this app service in here. And what I want is this app service, okay, to basically access my key vault. Okay, that's all I want. I just want, hey, let me access my key vault because I want to grab a key that's there, which technically for the key vault, it's a secret. That's all you want to do, okay? So what I can do is I can actually go on Intra ID and register this app, this app service, okay, as an identity. So technically, you're creating an enterprise application of the type managed identity. And then you can configure RBAC permissions. So this is the authorization bits for that identity. Okay, we call it identity principal into Key Vault. Hey, this identity principal here is going to be allowed A, B, and C in this instance of Key Vault. It's not all the Key Vaults. It's just that specific instance that you have. We actually have two types of managed identities, okay? Which is a system assigned managed identity where you assign it directly to the service instance. So that specifically web app that we were talking about. Or you can have a user assigned managed identity, which today we're not going to talk about it, but basically this is a standalone Azure resource. So you need to go in Azure, hey, I want a user assigned managed identity. And that's actually a standalone Azure resource. The life cycle part of this is actually quite interesting here, because if it's a system assigned managed identity, there is a shared life cycle between the Azure resource and the managed identity. This means if you delete that Azure web app, you also are going to delete the managed identity, so that we do not have orphaned, managed identities. In the user assigned managed identity, no, that just doesn't happen. It's an independent life cycle, so you actually need to explicitly go to the ARM layer and say, hey, you know what? I want to delete this user assigned managed identity. And then we also have here another slide where we talk a little bit about how we can acquire, an access token. So if we talk about this token is going to be based on the managed identity. And as you can see here, all that you need to do in the token provider is get bear token provider and use this default Azure credentials, okay? You're already using the package, for Azure Identity so that you can make this happen. And this will get you the bear token that you can use this, in here, as you can see, this token provider, which is this object that we have here, and through an endpoint that you have. So there's no need actually to use a key, if we want to do, to do this. So with this, but first of all, let's just see something even before this, which is basically setting up, access, to Key Vault via a managed identity. Okay, so let's just do this, this bit here first. So if we look at this, so this is our, Key Vault. And even if I try to use secrets and just add a secret here, I'm not going to be allowed. Okay, so I tried to do this. I tried to see, hey, generate. I tried to put, something in here, something in here. I tried to do create, and this is just not allowing me to do this. See, I get an error. Hey, I can't create that because, you're not allowed. You don't have, even my user, I actually need to go here, okay, under access control, okay, for my Key Vault. And I need to do a role assignment, okay, to my specific user, okay? So in the role assignment, you can just search for Key Vault, and you can be, there's a bunch of Key Vault stuff in here. I'll go with Key Vault Secret Officer. This will give me, basically allow to create, new secrets, delete secrets, change the value, but I'm not allowed to manage permissions, which I also don't want to do. So I'm good with this one. Users and groups. I can now find myself, my user in here. Let me just put my old name, my old email here. Yes, come on. It's neither of those. Oh, come on, Azure. Help me out here. No. Come on. There you go. It's this one here. Okay. And we just select this. And then we can review and assign. See, this is kind of the resume. This is the role. This is going to be the scope. The scope is basically my specific Key Vault and to that service principal that I had here. So there you go. This sometimes it might take you a few minutes to kick in. Okay, so I can go to secrets now. Today was actually quite quick, but if it takes a longer, it is what it is. It just takes a few minutes to kick in the permissions, okay? So now I can just say here, hey, AZ, OpenAI key, for example, and just put, whatever key, I wanted in here. And there you go. Now I was able to add, okay, this key in here. Now, before we move on, I just want to call out something that's actually pretty cool, which is an app service integration with Azure Key Vault, okay? And the idea is to use something called Key Vault references in Azure App Services, okay? And with this, instead of you just creating, a value over there or having to write code into how I can get the Key Vault and to grab the secret, okay? What I can do is use this reference, okay, in a Key Vault, okay? So let's get back in here. Let's go back to this secret here. Let's grab, this is the current version. Let's click on it. And you have this secret identifier, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy everything up here, okay? Because this gives me, okay, a reference to this secret. You might ask yourself, Tiago, but what's the rest of the bit? The rest, as a suffix here, is basically the version. So if you want to have a specific version, you should copy everything. But I don't. I just want to have access to the latest version that I have here. So that's why I copy this. Now, we can go back to our web app. I have to do several things here before I can add this. One of the first things that I can do is going under identity, again under settings, and create a system assigned managed identity, which is basically just turn this on, press save and say yes. Okay. This is basically going to create me, like I said, okay, an enterprise application in Entra ID. If I go back here and, for example, we go into Entra, and into Entra ID, and let me just load this, and I load enterprise apps. Okay, so enterprise applications, and I just say, create it on like today. Still not here. Sorry, I need to change this to managed identities, of course. And you can see here that we just created, our enterprise application. Got it? So pretty cool stuff that we have here. So this was just created now. Okay, but okay, there you go. So now we can go back to this. So that means, hey, our web app has this. It's been created. There's still two more things that I need to do, which the last one is actually adding that key vault reference. But now I need to make sure that this object principal that I have here is allowed to go to the key vault. So we need to go back. To the key vault. And we need to make sure that we do a role assignment so that that managed identity is allowed to read the secret. So for that, if we scroll down, it's better just to search first for key vault. And then if we scroll down after that, come on, key vault. Oh my God, it didn't kick in. Okay, let's try to refresh the page. And let's just say key vault. It's not wanted us to do this. Okay, let's do this again. Let's go back. Let's refresh. Let's go to access control. Let me add role assignment. Let's all this to load. Let's give it some time. And now let's search key vault. There you go. Sometimes this happens, okay? I want to do this key vault secret user. But now, instead of user, I'll go managed identity. And I'm going to select a member. And I can select here, see, system assign. And look, I have some system assign managed identity also for Foundry, for an automation account. But what I want is an app service. And there you go. Our festive calendar is selected. And then we press select. And then we can review and assign. This is kind of what we saw before. We can assign this. And now that we have done that, so happy days, okay? We are now just one step away. That step is adding the actual reference under environmental variables. If we see this, now the source says app service, because this is actually being stored in app service. But what I'm going to do is, instead of putting the value in here, I'm going to put is this, and let me just unmask this for you. Microsoft .key vault, and now here we're going to put the secret identifier up, okay, to the version. Okay, so we're not actually adding the version. You could add the version too if you wanted, okay, but I don't, because I want to, if I update the value, I want to grab the new updated value. If you want to just keep always the same value, even if you generate new versions of this, sure thing, add then the version to the secret identifier, okay? And there you go. So we have done this. It's still complaining about this, which, to be totally honest, sometimes it happens and it's normal. Most of the times is because, we kind of did a good job in giving the right permissions. We forgot to, do the role assignment, something like this. Here is probably just complaining because I just did this just now and I actually didn't give him enough time, for that. I'll just keep refreshing this here and just to see if we see a green check in here. But that's what you should see. So now, let's imagine that was okay now. And that means that your users, for them, they're just using the app, but actually the application is actually going into Key Vault, grabbing the value from there. So you're using that external secret storage. And now you can have this app, you can have 20 more apps doing the same thing. And you just need to update values in one single place. So this, in terms of management, you can imagine, how cool is something like this versus, something else. Okay. So that's just just some demo about this. Hope you enjoyed. I'll go now just talk a little bit about, protecting, Azure OpenAI and other AI services. Always try to use RBAC authentication with managed identities, okay? Only if you don't have, any other way is that for sure thing, we should go and we should start doing, key access. So let's try to avoid key as much as we can. And something that in Azure OpenAI is still not possible, okay? But it is already possible in other services like storage accounts, for example. It's actually disabling account key access, okay? I can actually demo this and show you, let me just grab here a random, storage account from my demo environment, okay? I don't know, like for example, this one here. And actually, if you go, into configuration, I think under settings, there's actually here a setting that's called allowed storage account key access. So this is something that you should disable. Okay, it's a demo environment. I actually don't have it disabled, but it's something that you should try to disable as much as you can, because that means that you can no longer authenticate using keys into this Azure storage account. I would love to have every single service that allows keys and RBAC having this option. We still don't have it, okay? But we're working on, Microsoft is working on that to bring it, to more and more services. I would love to have it in all the services like today, okay? So that would be great. And I would love to be able to do this like today, disable everything that I had today. Of course, it's a dream because there's a lot of legacy applications being built that, they were using key access because that's what we used. And, changing those, you don't change it with a clap of fingers, okay? It might take a while. The other part is, RBAC role-based access, for Azure OpenAI. You can actually see here, okay, it's called Cognitive Services, OpenAI contributor, OpenAI user, and, gives you the rights that you have there. So those are the built-in RBAC roles that you have. Of course, look, if those do not fit the purpose for you, look, you can always create your own roles, okay? Custom roles. And in Azure, you don't need to have any kind of special, okay, of special licensing for that. It's not like in Entra ID that to create Entra ID custom roles, you need to have a premium license. In here, we just don't have that. So I just want to show you some key takeaways in here. First of all, use always managed identities as much as you can. Use RBAC, key vault the centralized secrets, and always block, the use of access keys, when possible. Okay, so those are kind of my four, big key takeaways from this. And my name is Tiago, and I hope you enjoyed today a little bit how you can secure Azure OpenAI environments. Okay, and let's stay in touch. You can always find me on follow.tiagocosta.com. Go there, find my profiles, and if you want to, send me a message via LinkedIn. Usually, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so just do that. It will be a pleasure, to have you there. Okay, so I'll see you all.